All right. I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to do. It's been so long. Um, Anybody remember how we start this thing? Something about
I
if you
think
can
this
hear
is
my
the best 90 minutes or
no,
120
no, no,
minutes.
no. It's
No,
never been.
not minute. Oh,
Are we
okay.
even doing 90 minutes? I think it's something about if you can see my face and hear my voice, you know it's time once again for the worst 120 minutes or so in all of sports podcasting. That's right. It's time for the inaugural return of the inaugural beginnings of the first, second, third iteration of the, yeah, that thing, the Too Many Guys Soccer Show. We are back like a spine. We took a brief break. The world has changed under our feet as we podcast. It's a whole entire new sports world. The U.S. women's national team is out of the World Cup earlier than ever. Messi's playing in the MLS in Miami and tearing it up. And producer Stead's living in Georgia.
That's right. Neymar's not the only one with the train going on, man. I am coming live from Marietta, right outside Atlanta. Happy to be down here. But one thing I also hope we can talk about today is I want to talk about this whole issue is Mbappe really going to make 700 million euros to play one season in Europa League? I mean, that's more than some leagues' salaries are. So is that really
We'll
going
get
to
into
happen?
that.
We'll get into that at some point.
Because this is the first of our season previews. We're going to go through the Premier League. We'll talk hopefully to Celtic Cam a little bit later about the Scottish Premier League, which already has started. We'll touch on a little bit of what we expect in some of the other leagues, like in Italy and Spain. And hopefully we'll get Byron Robb on to give us the first of his previews on the Bundesliga, which doesn't actually start for a couple of more weeks. So we've got some time there. We've got to talk about the transfer window and all the big stories that we missed. So really great, exciting show to start our relaunch after our hiatus. Show 101. We are also joined this evening by our very, very good friend coming all the way from outside of Philadelphia someplace, Professor Matt. How goes it, my good friend?
It goes well, Mike. It goes well. Great to be back with you guys.
Great to see you as well. Hope that you enjoyed your summer.
I did. I can't say that for my students, but I did.
Yes. Well, that's the great thing about being a teacher is you can make sure that you enjoy your summer while loading them down with the needless schoolwork, which may or may not actually be graded at the end of the time. I myself was down in the Dominican Republic a couple of weeks ago. We had a really great time. Ran into somebody who you guys might remember from the NBA back in the day. Uh, Former Houston Rocket and world champ Otis Thorpe
Oh,
was chilling around the resort that we were staying at. Big shout out to this guy. He is one of the nicest individuals that you could possibly meet. Now, let's not get it twisted. He is still extremely tall.
yeah, he's
I
like
go
6'10".
I go about 6'2", 6'3", and he has me by at least a foot. So very nice guy. He was there with his wife and his wife's family and some friends, just living it up. First and foremost, great to see that this guy is doing well, right? He did his stuff at this time in the NBA. He's healthy. He's enjoying life. He's got enough money going on that he can go and enjoy an extended vacation. And to put it mildly, this resort wasn't exactly the cheapest of them all. So, he's enjoying himself. But I got to tell the story, one night, the first night I met him, it was late. We were out partying as one is wont to do on a all-inclusive resort where the drinks are very well and affordably priced at free or included. So I took a picture with him and I see him the next day when I'm in the evening and he's, hey, how you doing, buddy? Good to see you again. He says, yeah, brother, I tried to get your attention at the pool, but you straight up ignored me. Somebody, please contact the show and let me know how I managed to miss all 6'10" plus of Otis Thorpe trying to get my attention. Right? That is by far one of the more embarrassing moments of my life. So not only did I ignore an NBA champion, I completely didn't see it. And how I can miss a 6'10" black man at a resort in the Dominican Republic is still beyond me. So, Stead, I know you had a busy summer getting moved and stuff like that. So
Yeah, but I also spent some time in Chicago, which was great. Cousin of mine got married, but Chicago is an absolutely beautiful city from the architecture standpoint. And so if you ever get there, do the boat tours, because you can really get some fantastic views in there. I also spent some time in Jamaica, so that was cool. I got to actually not do the resort thing this time. We actually, a couple of our friends are actually of Jamaican descent. So we went with them and we had a nice villa with a pool, and our kids just swam in the pool, and we went to the beach and we just walked around and got a good sense of what the northern part of the island looks like. It's not quite as developed as the southern part of the island. So we were up near Ocho Rios between Mobay, and it was great. And I'm looking forward to getting my feet wet again. We went to this one spot though, since we're all regaling with some stories though. There's a place called Blue something that's totally leaving me. It's this river that runs through this one area near Ocho Rios, and yeah, jumping off cliffs and jumping off waterfalls and jumping off rocks into river water that goes down to 40 feet deep, and it's rushing, and you got to get sucked under white water and everything, and they tell you to wear a life jacket. But me being a former lifeguard, and I just didn't like the constriction of the life jacket, so I was just jumping in free. It was great. It's one of those things that there is no way they would do this in the United States. But in Jamaica, have at it, brother. We had a blast. It was great.
what I was going to say was we need to take that, because next summer the Cricket World Cup, the T20 Cricket World Cup, is going to be in Jamaica, well, the West Indies in the United States. So
Yeah, okay.
Speaking of which, Stan,
Mike, could you get a little closer to your microphone?
well, my microphone, I'll do my best.
That's fine. Where you are right there, that works.
All right. Speaking of which, Stan, we are just about a month out from the beginning of the Rugby World Cup.
We certainly are. Not going to be on Peacock again this year?
I believe so. I hope so. Some really good matches. We'll definitely get into that more.
We're going to have our standalone shows for that too, definitely.
Yes, we definitely will. So I left and jumped back in while we were regaling people about our summer travels. Matt, I hope you did something fun over the summer while you were taking off from your teaching duties, more so than read weird books and eat Russian food.
Well, I've been teaching all summer, but it's been online, so all from home base. We have made a point to do some day trips. I introduced my wife to the North Jersey bar pie, which my mission in life is at least partially fulfilled. So happy about that. Yeah, been down the shore a couple times. Small things, but it's what it is.
All right, well, gentlemen, let's get this party started. While it's been a good summer for us, it has been a bit of a lackluster summer for United States soccer. We were able to defeat Mexico in the Nations League, but then an early exit in the Gold Cup to Panama, bringing a B squad in the Gold Cup, and then most spectacularly, the U.S. women with what can only be described as a lackluster showing in the World Cup that sees them exit at the round of 16 on penalties to Sweden, having scored a total of 4 goals in 4 games, 3 of which came in their opening match against Vietnam. We knew that this was going to be a bit of a transition. The old guard that had won the back-to-back World Cups, most of them have been shuffled to the side. Players, Becky Sauerbrunn was out. Mallory Swanson, who is a key player in the midfield, was injured. Julie Ertz has barely played in the last 2 years, having given birth to her and Zach's first child. We had what we thought would be the beginnings of a new front line in Sophia Smith and Trinity Rodman, but that was not misfiring. But then even players who we were dependent on, it just did not come together for them. It was not helped at all, I believe, by Vlatko Adanovsky and his team selection, where for some strange reason in the game that requires defense forgot to bring center backs, and his downright refusal to make substitutions at any point in the game where it could have been changed. Just overall, not a great World Cup for the U.S. women. So, Matt, I know we did, Mike and Rob did a longer show on this right after their exit, but I wanted to give you a chance to say your piece on the U.S. women and their performance in this summer's World Cup.
Unfortunately, due to the start times, I did not watch nearly as much of this tournament as I would like to. It's disappointing. It's underwhelming. Yeah, there's transition, but the tactics, the squad selection, the lack of changes, strategic changes hurt them. And when you're talking about the U.S. men's team, I think you're tempering your expectations. For the women's team not at least to get to the quarterfinals, that's a disappointment, however you slice it. And it sort of began even, at the very beginning of the group stage. They set a tone 4 years ago when they absolutely demolished Thailand. And coming out of a match against Vietnam, which I'll freely admit I don't know very much about the Vietnamese women's setup, only with a scoreline of 3-0. I know teams grow into tournaments, but that I something felt off even from there. So yeah, it's disappointment. No other way you can slice it.
And I'm going to piggyback on that too, because I was the one that was saying that the U.S. is going to beat Vietnam like 19-0. I thought it was going to be an absolute blowout. And even Chelsea Mike was like, no, it'll probably be somewhat competitive. The U.S. probably take it easy, but still, they should still get in. And you saw the manner of the highlights. 3-0. It was that was when I went, oh, okay, well, this might be something different. Because yes, due to the time and due to my summer, I was unable to watch much of the tournament as well. But I think there's two things here that really, I think you have to almost not give the U.S. women a pass, but understand that in any sport where there is particular dominance from one country, the rest of the world is going to begin to catch up. And we're seeing that outside of the big women's teams of U.S., Germany, it used to be Canada. It's kind of surprising what happened to Canada because they were really good too. And but then you have Sweden, and then you have Japan. But you're seeing, Chelsea Mike pointed this out too. You're seeing a rise of football coming out of Africa. Nigeria used to just win everything all the time in Africa, but then you saw Morocco win it. But you're seeing other teams coming up. Go ahead.
The real story of this tournament is, obviously, us being the United States, is the fact that we went home so early. But it's really the rise, not just of these African teams, but even these Southern European and these Latin American teams, like this run that Colombia is going on.
Yeah.
Just 15 years ago, because of a mixture of underdevelopment, straight up cultural machismo, the women's game effectively didn't exist. So something very interesting. I think that's the big story to take away.
Yeah, Colombia is especially surprising too, because I don't think they had a squad, and that team looks like they're going to semifinal, if not final. So there's a lot of other intriguing stories going on outside the U.S. team, which as a whole, I think when you look at this tournament as a whole, it's probably bad for the U.S., but it's great for the rest of the world and the rise of women's football. I think it's fantastic.
The U.S. used to be able to win, and we still probably will. I don't think for a second that the U.S. has.
Yeah, I don't think they've lost the step or anything. No, I don't think so either. Yeah,
I don't think that necessarily lost their step. I don't think that they've lost their edge. I just think that, in any sport, it's hard to continually dominate over the same course
Yeah,
for as long
absolutely.
as they have. Remember, we have won what four, 3 World Cups, 4 World Cups, right?
Mhm.
Of the ones
I
that
think
have been
4.
competed. But we also went quite a bit of time, about 3 or 4 World Cups where we did not win, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
It used to be that the U.S. was able to dominate simply by manner of resources. We had more money than anybody else did.
Hmm.
Because we had more money, we were able to uncover more players. That is still the case, but what you're starting to see now is um, the NWSL being the most stable women's professional league that we've had in the U.S. in a long time has, and the need to put players on that team have benefited teams like Jamaica,
Hmm.
Yeah.
Colombia, South America,
Haiti.
right? Haiti.
Hmm.
All right. The same can be said for Spain,
Hmm.
where the women's La Liga has grown in stature. That has benefited the Spanish team and other teams in Europe, as well as the rise of the women's the WPSL, the Women's Premier League in England. As these men's clubs in Europe start to put more money into their women's programs, we start to see these teams, these smaller nations develop because it is giving more and more women an avenue to play, right? And these have been good for countries in Africa. So you do have, and let's talk about it. Look, Morocco may be on one of the best runs that nobody's talking about, both in the men's and women's game. The
Hmm.
first North African Arab team to make it to a Women's World Cup, the first North African women's Arab team to make it to the knockout stages of the Women's World Cup, following on becoming the first African team to make it to a World Cup semifinal. Right,
Hmm.
like their whole entire country, and this is not a big country. It's just happened to have, it's like every woman who had a child in the mid '90s to the early 2000s in Morocco somehow had a child that could play soccer.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is other than it's like everybody who had a child in between like 1987 and the year 2001, they just all play soccer.
Yeah, and they're able to take advantage of the fact that you have players who are growing up in countries all over the world that can capitalize off of various resources that are taking place in Belgium or in France or something like that. And then, of course, they say, okay, that's great, but I'm still going to play for Morocco, or I may not make it to that level to play for the Belgium or France, but I can always go play for Morocco and be like, don't forget, France's B team could compete for a World Cup. So, these countries are stacked with players, both men and women.
But more and more of them, we have a family friend whose daughter plays for the Dominican Republic.
Mm-hmm.
An American girl from this area whose mom is Dominican, and she opted to play for the Dominican Republic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, what was it, like half of the Philippine squad in the World Cup are American?
Yeah, well, I'm a military kid. Half of my friends growing up were half Filipino.
We still are going to have this situation where the U.S. is going to export players. It just happens that this cohort was not the right one.
Mm.
Going back to what you said about even the Vietnam game being very telling, yes, the struggle to break down Vietnam was very telling of their inability to score. I love Alex Morgan. I think that she has been a phenomenal player, but I just don't think that she has ever been somebody who has scored enough, especially at the international level, for her to be the dependable person leading a line.
Mm-hmm.
I think she gets into some really, really great positions, but to me, I've just never seen her be the dependable enough scorer to just to lead that line. And it's almost a lot of times like she she's that striker who, oh well, we have to have her in there because she does everything else. Her hold up play, her link up play, her ability to pick out passes, and stuff. But at the same time, I also need you to score goals. And if you are if you are number 9, if you're going to lead the line, I need you to score goals, and I need you to score them in bunches.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you are leading it with 2 very, very, very young ladies on either side of you playing in your first World Cup, right? Like you need to be the talisman, you need to be the leader, and I just felt like she just was found a little bit wanting in that situation. But yeah, outside of the U.S. going out early, outside of Canada being probably the next big, Germany being the biggest surprises, exits beyond that.
Yeah,
both of them leaving at the group stages.
Yeah, and the U.S. was a post away from being out of the group stage as well.
Yeah, they were a post away, but they were also, they were. Who knows if Mayer gets her hand on that ball just a second sooner?
Absolutely.
That is a fraction of an inch away from being one of the all-time great saves.
Yeah,
Men, women, dogs, or aliens. In soccer history, if she's able to claw that one back out.
But I think as a whole, though, this has been a great tournament. It is a great tournament, and it'll continue to be a great tournament. And not because the U.S. lost, but I think it's just because that you're seeing a lot of other nations that are making this game a bit more competitive. I mean, look, I can always go back and talk about early stages when they were doing international hockey tournaments and Canada was winning 22-0. I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same thing that's happening. The same thing with basketball, with the U.S. and Soviet Union. And the only reason why that was happening because the U.S. wasn't playing professionals, they're only playing college kids because they could have won every single two. So, I think this is great to just see the fact that the game is finally becoming a bit more competitive, because for the longest time, it really has not been that competitive when it gets to the elite stage. It's just not.
What the funny thing is, though, Irvin Hart has an opportunity to win yet another trophy and become the first person to ever lift a men's and a women's international trophy.
Who is that? Say that again.
Irvin Hart, the manager of France.
Oh, okay.
He's now the first person to ever win both a men's and a women's World Cup game. But yeah, so that'll be interesting. Can women of England bring home a World Cup and do something that the men haven't done since 1966?
Under very, very suspicious circumstances for that 66 World Cup. I'm sorry. The World Cup is notoriously corrupt, especially during that time. So I was like, I saw read some things about that World Cup. It's like, it's almost as bad as the Argentina Cup in 76.
If you take that
or 74, I mean.
They haven't really been that. They've never won a World Cup. The country that invented the game.
No. I'm sorry. I think it's the 78 Cup. I think it was the 78 Cup in Argentina, which is awesome. Yeah. Like I think that's like the worst one. I think the one that's not too far below it, when for post World War II anyway, is maybe that England one was a little.
Which is saying a lot because Argentina in '78 was sure a military dictatorship. Like England, where are you? Yes.
Hey, listen. This is back in the time. This is back in the day when people weren't really just paying attention to it like they are now. It wasn't Pele hadn't even won his first one yet. So
yeah.
The World Cup doesn't become a thing. It doesn't matter until Pele wins his first World Cup.
Yeah, it's basically doesn't come until about 1950.
Yeah.
I mean, and then they went in 58. But the 51 was really only a thing in South America. So yeah.
But they did go from 58 to 70 without winning one. And so if Brazil does not win the next one.
No, they won in 62. They won 58, 62, and 70.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, no, it was 72.
Yeah, it was 70 to 94.
94.
70 to 94. Yeah, they didn't. Yeah, they didn't.
So
they didn't
if they do not win the next one, it'll be the.
I don't even think they finaled.
They were in a couple of finals that they lost in between.
I know they lost in '98 and they lost in another relatively recent one, but
I think they also finaled. You can look it up, but they may have finaled or been in the semifinals in the '70s.
Of course. Yeah, they said.
Yeah.
But they were not like, this would be the most barren run internationally for Brazil. They're about to eclipse their most barren run internationally ever, if they are not successful when it comes back to the United States. But speaking of people,
Brazil did not final between 70 and 94. They did not final.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're coming up. Yeah, but we're coming up because they haven't finaled since 02. And yeah, you're right. We're coming up on the same basic stretch. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Actually, they passed it now because they flash final.
Well, and it's the same thing kind of with the U.S. as different leagues around the world. Talent drains, other
Mhm.
things have. You no longer can count on just the systematic dominance
Mhm.
of Germany and Brazil when it comes to soccer. Because
Mhm.
let's be honest, yeah, Italy was great prior to World War II, and they've propped up a couple of times since then.
Mhm.
But pretty much, you can set your clock by Brazil and the German teams
Mhm.
in the World Cup, and both of those programs have been struggling by their high standards. A
Yeah.
rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is the age of France right now.
Well, yeah, but it's the age of Mbappe. So let's talk about what you brought up.
Yeah.
Really take $700 million to play Europa League football. There was the weird offer for him to potentially go to Chelsea, um, which doesn't seem like it's going to come to fruition. We'll talk to Chelsea Mike a little bit later about that, because on the one hand you have Todd Bowley and company talking about they're going to spend this money to bring in Mbappe or Neymar, but at the same time they're going out and doing a $500 million capital raise because they need more money to fund this project. So that math ain't mathing to me.
Mhm.
One of the big issues, he already has turned down the better part of $1 billion for one season to potentially go to Saudi Arabia, and said that he's not interested. But at the same time, it's been announced that he will be trading away from the PSG first team
Mhm.
as this contract saga goes on. What is clear to us now is Mbappe wants to go to Real Madrid.
Mhm.
Real Madrid are not going to buy him right now because they already understand that he wants to go there. They want him. Whether or not there's been official contact or just, some notion of what numbers it's going to take have been exchanged, behind the scenes, people have talked. We know that there's probably not some sort of official contract sitting in the back room, safe someplace, post dated to, January 1st, 2024, which would be when he would be legally allowed to sign a pre-contract. I don't think that that's there, but there's definitely a general feeling that he is going to end up at Real Madrid. Real Madrid now feel confident that they don't need to pay a transfer fee to get somebody who they can get on a free, albeit hefty contract with a hefty sign-on fee. PSG know that he is not going to resign for them, and they want to capitalize on their star player leaving, as many teams would want to do. So we're at an impasse where PSG wants some money for the player who's not going to resign. They have said either you resign for us or you don't play. And Mbappe saying, all right, bring it. I know where I'm going. I know where I'm not going. And his willingness to maybe entertain going and playing for 1 year, but only in certain circumstances. Now, I would have been surprised if he had gone to Chelsea because Chelsea's not in Europe. And what do you gain by playing a season for Chelsea in the Premier League and not being in Europe, which he has said is kind of like his big thing, right? The only way that he gets his hands anywhere close to a Ballon d'Or this year is by a successful European campaign. Right? He did not have that with PSG last year. He did not win the World Cup, but he had a miraculous game. He's one of two people who scored a hat trick in the game. His only problem was the other one won it, and that was Messi. Right? Messi didn't had. Fortunately for him, Messi had an even worse season for PSG, and is now lighting it up, but in MLS. So Mbappe does have a chance to win the Ballon d'Or to break up that sort of the dominance that Messi and Ronaldo used to have, and he has his chance to win it. But what he needs to do is have a good start to this campaign, and especially one in the Champions League. So why he would want to go and play in the Conference League, and I don't know how anybody could really theoretically make the amount of money that they would have to pay him to play work with anything that resembles um, financial fair play.
Of course. Of course.
I mean, not just the money that's being thrown around for, we're talking what, $250 million transfer fee,
Mm-hmm.
and then probably upwards of $100 million in salary. So 300, about a third of $1 billion, easy. Now, he's not going to get anywhere near what he would get in playing in Europe. He gave up his money, and I'm going to applaud him. I think it was good. He had the opportunity to go and make straight up cash wrap for a year in Saudi Arabia. Said, you know what? Thanks. I'm good. I just don't want to. This is not the right move for me as a player at the burgeoning on the peak of my prime, and to go and play a season in Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely.
And I want to stay at the top. So it's going to be really interesting. I think that this is one that won't be solved right until deadline day. But it definitely looks like it's going to be, for my money, it's going to be a 1-year loan deal with a hefty loan fee.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was suspecting. Because
my other issue with that is, and here's what I don't know. I don't know if they can do that because I don't know if you can sign a year-long loan with only 1 year left on your contract.
Well, he's said he's prepared to sit this year, and which I think is a better move than going to Saudi Arabia. I mean, if the worst thing that can happen is he goes to Saudi Arabia, he makes $500 million, but breaks his ankle because he's playing that are that don't have the physical tools to be able to handle a forward like him, and you have to wonder too. I think all this does is this just solidifies what the issue is with the French league and what the issue PSG knew they were going to eventually have to face is that you cannot compete in Europe in the league that you play in with the way that you're playing because you're so dominant in your league. I mean, look, there's a reason why teams like Marseille seem to do better in Europe because they don't have the ease of just kind of glide through the league like PSG does year in and year out. And look, all's not well there. All of a sudden, I think Neymar's feeling a little jealous because it's not getting any cameras on him lately. Now he's saying he wants to leave. So the whole situation there is really, really getting a little stinky. But Mike, we talked about this when this contract was years ago. We said, look, he doesn't want to play there. He doesn't want to play there. It was obvious he didn't want to play there. And now he's at a point where he's going, look, I'll just sit a year. I won't add a year of wear and tear on my body, and I'll just go to Real Madrid for free, and I'll probably make even more money because they don't have to worry about paying any sort of transfer fee for me. So I think it's going to work out for Mbappe in the end. This is going to work out for him in some way, shape, or form. I think a loan is look, rules are rules and they get broken all the time. And I just see that eventually Mbappe is going to end up where he wants to be. PSG is going to come out of this going, okay, who are we going to have to throw money at to get to come here so we can continue our dominance and hopefully win the Champions League? Or they're going to be, or hey, let's try to get this whole European Super League going again. Because that's what they really want.
They do have one problem, and I wonder how much this plays into it. And Matt, I'll get to you in a second, provided he's Matt. But PSG do not own the Parc des Princes. That's owned by the French government. They have been trying to buy it, but it's essentially the French national stadium, right? And so they don't own it. They want the French government to either sell them the stadium or do a lot of upkeep and expansion because it's a smaller stadium. They have, PSG have outgrown the building. So they need to figure, but they're kind of tied to lease-wise playing there. I find it a bit interesting that within a couple of months of them hearing again that they're not going to be able to take over the stadium, and that they're still going to be stuck with this deal almost in perpetuity, where they're renting the stadium and they have to share the stadium income with the French government, that all of a sudden they just seem to be pulling up stumps and attacking. I don't want to say that they're pulling up stumps and not investing in this team anymore, but they just seem to be going at it a bit differently. We're not going to do the Galacticos thing. We're going to start getting rid of Neymar. We're going to, and we'd already heard Neymar was a potential casualty of this. Like they were kind of over Neymar. I haven't really heard of any incoming signings. You know, all of their marquee players, for my money, have left this year. You know, if you get rid of Neymar, there is no more Neymar. There is no more Mbappe. There is no more Messi. You know, this is not looking much like the team that they fielded a year ago, let alone two, that was supposed to take over the world. Every star that we have seen go to France has lasted one contract or less. Zlatan was the first. He went, he did his thing, he left. Neymar, I think he's what, 2 contracts in?
He's stuck it out the longest. Yeah, he for some reason he's been quite settled there. But yeah, outside of him, outside of him,
most of them have just been there for about 5-6 years.
Yeah, they go there, they get a good contract, they make some paper, they get kicked out of Champions League a couple times, and they leave.
Even Verratti who was there. He's been trying to go. Thiago Silva, he went,
who's the other guy from Argentina? He played there for just a spell. Di Maria, yeah, but he was also a one contract guy, I believe.
No, he stayed a little bit longer than everybody else.
Yeah.
Cavani was another one. No, was it? It wasn't Cavani. It was the other one. But they've all just kind of gone, and left. Marquinhos is the one that's been there a while.
He's been there a while, yeah.
But they kind of, you see these guys, they come, they stay, they see that, you know, it's just something about the way the club is, and not being in the fabric of the club on a regular basis. I can't see what it is, but there just seems to be a disconnect in between management and the players that leaves them dissatisfied. They just do not seem happy long term to be there. And eventually you get to a point where the money just isn't good enough. All right, Matt, if there's one thing I know about you, Professor Matt, is you are a big proponent of players and making money while you can. So what do you think of this Mbappe situation?
I have to agree with Stead. He's going to go someplace, either the loan or, you know, sitting out this season wouldn't be a horrible thing. You have to preserve your body. Like Stead said, he's going to wind up at Real Madrid one way or another. I think not going to Saudi Arabia, even though I think in his situation it's not serious, I think was a really good way to kind of preserve his brand, in so much that it's like, yeah, this guy is the face of this game for the next 6 or 7 years. Oh yeah, he didn't dip for one big payday for a season in Saudi Arabia. The whole PSG, I don't know what to call it, because it's not a rebuild. Maybe think this summer is fascinating to me because, and we've talked about this a lot on this show, there's something wrong with this model. There's something really, really wrong with this model. If I'm PSG, yes, obviously you want to cash in on your biggest asset. But this is a unique opportunity to potentially rewrite this model. Because here's the thing. Most of their big star guys, or at least the last core of them, other than Neymar and Mbappe, are gone. Ramos is gone. Verratti's gone. They have made one signing this summer, which I would have taken this guy in a heartbeat. Ugarte from Sporting Lisbon, young defensive midfielder. These are the kind of signings that they should be making, because maybe you should build a culture, build a squad, and not pay for 11 individuals to do stuff and get thrown out of Europe early. I don't know. Mbappe is going to wind up at Madrid. We know this one way somehow. If it's the end of this window, if it's this time next year, I'm going to look at it from maybe the opposite end of the spectrum. This is a very unique opportunity for PSG to do things differently. Now, whether they do that or not, I don't know. Who is their manager at the moment?
I have no idea.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's like,
Go look that up. Who's PSG's manager?
It's definitely a different project. You ever feel though, like PSG, and gentlemen, we're all teachers.
That's Luis Enrique.
okay.
We're all teachers, so and although none of us have really taught English language arts, we're all familiar with the concept of the kid who writes the book report without actually reading the entire book.
Oh, I taught English language arts. I taught that subject. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I had a teacher who always used to assign the natural, and he could tell the kids who read the book versus watching the movie because the ending to the book is totally different than the ending to the movie. And that
colleague of mine does that with Clockwork Orange too.
Yeah, like on the test you write how did the story end, and you can always tell the ones who read the book versus the movie because the ending is completely different. You ever feel like PSG and some other teams, Chelsea to a certain extent, are the ones who are who are writing a book report on Florentino Perez and the Real Madrid and the Galacticos policy without actually reading the second half of the book? Because remember, the first set of Galacticos failed miserably, and for like 10, 15 years, they got knocked out early. Then he came back and he did the same thing. Yes, he did do the same thing, picking up, Kaká and James Rodriguez, Gareth Bale, Karim Benzema and Cristiano Ronaldo, Toni Kroos, Luka Modric, all of these guys, and they spent big, and it was like just a matter of them winning the offseason every year. But then after a while, it got to a point where Real Madrid stopped doing that. Now you look at the majority of the signings, the ones who they're going to use moving into the future, the Fede Valverde's, Eduardo Camavinga was very, very highly rated, but kind of not in that realm. He definitely wasn't a big money buy. He probably cost more than your average 19-year-old would. Aurelien Tchouameni, all of these guys were sort of like kind of a little bit under, I don't want to call them under the radar, but they weren't like these big, huge, we're going to go out and throw 70, 80, 90, hundreds of millions, even in proportion to what transfers are now versus what they were even 10 years ago. And so it's like, they reached a point where they didn't do that. They'd established a certain brand, and now they're like, we're just going to kind of get the players in that we need, right? And so I think Jude Bellingham is the first person I've seen them buy who will be a day one starter in the market in the outfield in probably about 7 years. And that's now like, yeah, they pay a lot for him, but they had the money because they moved on Rafa Varane, they moved on these players, they moved on Karim Benzema, and there's one for you who's playing striker for Real Madrid. Now that Benzema's gone, like, what's their plan there? So even Vinicius Jr., who's become kind of their talisman, again, cost a little bit more than you expect for an 18, 19-year-old from Brazil, and he only ever had eyes for Real Madrid, but it wasn't like they were backing up the Brinks truck to necessarily get him. So you don't have to do what PSG did, what it seems like Chelsea is doing, which is just go out and win the summer. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, you feel like Real Madrid has sort of kind of learned you don't win at the end of May simply by winning in July, August, and September, and winning the transfer portal.
And the other thing there, all those names you mentioned, Mike, this is key, I think. And Bellingham was a little bit above and beyond, but all of the guys that Madrid have targeted over the last couple windows are young and they fit what is already established and they want to do. PSG, it's just like I know, Mike, you're also a fellow Yankees fan. It's like bad Yankees off seasons where it's like, guy is good, sign him. Whether he fits, that is irrelevant. That's been the
It's
issue.
Dan Snyder in the early 2000s.
Yeah,
Late 90s, early 2000s, Dan Snyder, absolutely.
Stead's eyes just rolled so hard. I actually could feel them rolling when he said that. Just his expression, his eyes just rolled so hard. I think it registered on the Richter scale.
Yeah, probably.
But no,
Yeah.
it is. It's Dan Snyder in the early, it's Dan Snyder in the late 90s, early 2000s, just throwing good money after bad. And it's not just a PSG thing, guys. Like, it's a thing throughout. Like, every time I say PSG, you notice I follow up by saying Chelsea, because kind of what we're watching Todd Bowley do right now is go out and sign anybody who's got a name, who's hot. It's like they've got a guy playing FIFA career mode in the back room.
Well, that Mike, that was a beautiful transition. Mike, that was a beautiful transition. Beautiful transition to Premier League, especially as the person who's just now chiming in. I mean, the timing of this could not be better. Chelsea, Mike, let's turn your camera on, because we have just finished discussing, various things with Mbappe and PSG, and now we have slowed to Premier League, and we seem to think that Chelsea is playing on career mode at FIFA, with Todd Bowley wanting to sign every possible player who he thinks is is any good to the squad and have them start immediately. So I think we go ahead and kick off our Premier League, Mike. I mean, that was a great transition, Mike.
Let's bring it on. I couldn't have timed it better, and I actually didn't see that happening. So I'm going to pat myself on the back and act like I knew what was going on. Chelsea Mike, how goes it, my good friend?
Oh, it goes.
It goes. I see you resplendent in your U.S. women's jersey with your Sam Kerr jersey, Chelsea jersey hanging behind you. We did a plug for your post-mortem on the U.S. women's national team a little earlier, and Matt and I instead got into it, talking about, just the Women's World Cup and the U.S. exit in general. If there's anything that you want to say in 10 words or less to recap how you felt about this World Cup, go for it.
Fire Vlatko Adanovsky.
It's the first time that we gave Mike 10 words and he actually only used 10 or less. So as we get looking into the Premier League, and especially your Chelsea Blues, this is the second season of the Todd Bowley era, the first season under Pochettino. We were just finishing up our conversation on Mbappe. There were the rumors surrounding him possibly going to Chelsea for a year. Nobody seems to think that's legitimately going to happen. One, because they're not playing European football. Two, because where are they really going to get the money? But Mike, the transfer window for Chelsea makes for some interesting, I guess, reading. Part of the problem was that they had a bloated team last year with a lot of players, kind of a lack of identity, and they couldn't score goals. I got a question if they figured that part out. They did bring in Christopher Nkunku, who had been signed very early on, but he's going to miss the first 4 months of the season with a knee injury. And Mason Mount's gone. Kai Havertz is gone. Romelu Lukaku looks like he's on his way out. but Raheem Sterling is still there. What's going on in Bowley Land over in Stamford Bridge?
Well, I think what you saw was pretty much some addition by subtraction. There were too many players on the team, and I think anyone could agree that their squad was overloaded. It had guys who seemingly didn't want to be there, all the way down to Mason Mount. And I think what they're doing now is sort of more akin to the Brighton model. You know, it's bring in younger guys, get new, fresh. They're bringing younger guys. It's maybe an American baseball model too, to a certain degree, which obviously Bowley would be familiar with, being the Dodgers co-owner.
Remember what he did when he was the Dodgers owner? What were his first moves? We're going to bring in Adrian Gonzalez. We're going to bring in Mookie Betts. We're going to bring in every big name that we can possibly get our hands on,
Well,
and hope it works.
And I think that it's very much the same, right? They brought in Mudryk, you know, bring in Enzo, spend a lot of big money up front for these big guys. And now in the summer, you see that they didn't bring in a lot of big guys. I think Nicholas Jackson has the potential to be the starting nine for Chelsea. You know,
Well, he's going to have to be, because if he's not the starting nine, who is?
It's a good question. You know, I think it is. I think it is him. But he wasn't. You know, a guy like Mbappe. He wasn't an enormous money signing. And I think that's going to be the approach to Chelsea going forward. They've gotten some of their big guys up front, and now they're going to bring in guys who are younger. Their contracts are smaller. They want to sign guys for longer term deals in, again, a style that's kind of unfamiliar to European football, and bring them in for longer. And that's what they're doing. I kind of understand it. I don't know if it's going to work, but it's certainly it's an approach, and it's a strategy, and they're utilizing it. And let's just say that after pretty much the horror of last year, you know, I mean, is it going to be worse? I mean, could it be? I don't know.
Well, that's a good question, gentlemen. Can it get worse for Chelsea? Ideally, with the first season of Poch, we would believe that they would be competing for the Champions League. Last year, they were competing to stay in the top half of the table, a battle which they eventually failed at. There is no more European football, and we've heard that refrain before, that, you know, oh, well, it'll be good for them because they won't have to play as many games, there won't be as many travel days. You know, Pochettino will have more time during the week to work with his team because he won't have any European commitments. Instead, I'll start with you. What do you expect of this idea of addition by subtraction for Chelsea this year?
Well, considering having just come from that plan, if because it's Pochettino, I think actually Chelsea can make some improvements. I do. He's a very competent coach, and you're looking at what Chelsea's brought in this summer. They, you know, outside of Nkunku, they really haven't made a big money splash, and they're revamping the squad. So if you have a situation where hopefully Pochettino doesn't run them to death, but if he has a situation where he can effectively train throughout the week without being concerned with European football, and we'll see how well they do in the cups. You know, do you decide to make a run in the Man City Cup? Do you decide to make a run in the FA Cup or something like that? Because yeah, that could add some games here and there. But an effective manager can do that. Happen at Arsenal. It may take a couple of years. I think the bigger question is, can Chelsea be bad for 2 years? Can Chelsea fans handle 2 seasons where you might not get into Europe, or 2 seasons where you don't get into Europe and then you get into Europa League? And I think the more difficult part that Chelsea has to deal with that Arsenal luckily got a chance to avoid was we didn't have a really good Newcastle side to worry about. We didn't have another country that decided to buy a team when Arsenal was going through those types of things. So the hope is that, you know, if Chelsea were able to play effectively on the weekend, that's great. But you have to remember there's now like a big 7. You have to include Newcastle now. It's the Premier League as a whole is a better league than it was just a couple of years ago, just because of a new ownership group. So we'll see. But look, I see people who pick Man United to finish 8 and Man United to finish 2nd, and I'm correct. So it's going to be hard, but I think because you have a competent manager, that, you know, I don't care what any Spurs fan. That's the dumbest thing you could have done was fire him. I think that Chelsea can actually do okay. I mean, will they get top 4? I don't know, but I think Chelsea will definitely improve from last year, because last year was the players just didn't want to play.
Matt,
And I think coming off of last year, you know, yes, we want top 4. We're top 4 side. We're long been in the Champions League, but I think a Europa League finish for this Chelsea side is a pretty good outcome.
Mm-hmm. And you made
especially-
some money this summer. Chelsea made some money this summer. You sold a lot of players. You got a lot of money in.
Actually, the funny thing is though that they're about net balanced.
I think so.
They're about net balanced in between what they have to amortize for the transfers that they made last year,
Mm-hmm.
and the sign. And Kuku was very, very, very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even though they did get rid of the likes of Pulisic and Mount and Kai Havertz, what they took for those transfers balances them.
Mm-hmm.
It does not say that they make money. And
Well,
now,
of course, that's a relative term. We're talking about Chelsea here. If Chelsea's balanced, that's equivalent of making money.
that is, but you know, that was one of their things. And Mike, I agree. Like, making the Europa League, I think, would be a good first thing. And instead, you brought it up. Making a run in the Man City Cup may not be the worst thing for them right now, because it is a guaranteed in February European place, right? Yeah, granted, I know it's only the Conference League, but that means in February you can say, like, we have a guaranteed spot in Europe for next year, regardless of what happens. You know, we've got that going for us. So,
And I've completely gone 180 about the Conference League. I used to hate it when it first started. I'm a big fan of it now. Big fan. I like the Conference League. I think it's very good thing that they have.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the Man City Cup, and that's it. But
Oh, no. I'm talking about
I mean, like,
Conference League's been like
thinking,
2-3 years. I mean, we dumped on it on this show. I was like, that's stupid. And now I'm like, no, I think it's great. I think it's wonderful.
but you know, making it to Europe. But Matt, for Sunday coming up, that's your first game.
Yeah.
Typically, this would be one that we were like all chomping at the bit to see. You know, this would have been the biggest of the big games to
And
the
it's
start of the
only
season.
to end 0-0.
Yeah. Well, we have two teams that are in different points in transition. So, you know, I believe that right now you have a Chelsea team that has a great manager, and I do think that Poch will do good things for them. I don't know how many points Poch is worth on his own over last season. I would probably say he's good for about 9 points for them, this team, based on where it was last season. But I don't know if 9 points is simply good enough. You have two teams with midfield questions. What looks like a Liverpool team that can still defend against a Chelsea team that can't score, and a Liverpool team that has no midfield, and we have questions about their ability to score. This has all the makings of a 0-0.
I see. I'm not sure about that because I don't think I don't think goals are going to be the problem for my boys this year. In fact, there's a scenario where 2 to 3 players get 20 and or close. The defense, if the 4 guys who should normally start stay healthy, yeah, it's pretty good. Our midfields become more creative. We ain't have no holding man though. Curtis Jones going to be starting in the 6 on Sunday, and that represents a problem.
What about Bajcetic?
So to the sort of Chelsea thing, because if Mike didn't hate Brighton before this transfer window, he really has to hate Brighton now because they kind of have the same issue. Like Enzo's great. Enzo isn't a destroyer. That's Caicedo. Oh wait, they don't want to sell him to Chelsea. So I if it ends in a draw, I wouldn't be shocked. But I think this is going to be a scoring draw.
Well, Liverpool knew that they needed to get midfield help. They bought in Hungarian Jesus and Dominic Szoboszlai and Alexis McAllister, who was their big names. There is talk about Romeo Lavia coming over from Southampton, repeating a tradition of Liverpool buying Southampton's most expensive player, which had gone by the wayside. Maybe that was the reason why they struggled so greatly the last couple of years. They didn't buy a player from Southampton. But there's also been a lot of departures, right? We can talk about, Jordan Henderson being past his prime. We can talk about, Fabinho being past his prime, but it seems like there's been a lot more leaving Anfield than has been coming in. And this means that you're going to have to rely a lot on young players, and Klopp and youth team players. That's a very, very interesting relationship. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Where are you on this rebuild, and how confident are you feeling that this Liverpool team can again pull themselves up and challenge to get back into the Champions League?
The theme of this season for me is unknowns, right? I think it has to be, particularly after the departure of Henderson and Fabinho, who, while declining on the pitch, especially in regards to Henderson, the off the pitch stuff. And when I say that, I mean it's simple stuff like helping Hungarian Jesus find a fucking house on Merseyside is gone. There is a void. When I look at this squad, even if we bring Lavia through the door, even if we bring in, and I would like them to bring in another midfielder who's kind of a 6'8" hybrid, right? Because even if we're fully fit, we're entrusting the defensive midfield to a 20-year-old and a 19-year-old, both of whom I think are going to be very good players moving forward, but it's a 20-year-old and a 19-year-old nonetheless. It's really shades of 2013-14, 2017-18. The attack and the rebuild of the attack, I think, has gone just fine. Nunez speaks English now. That's positive. And he seems to, at least what we're seeing in preseason, there seems to be a definitive role. He's a big number 9 who can play out left. He can do the interchange, but he's not He's not being used out there. As good as Mo Salah is, and he's great. Our best finisher is Diego Jota. He's the most clinical striker on this team. The problem is he hasn't been able to stay healthy. If he stays healthy, look, I'm not going to go against the, Norwegian Lego head man for Golden Boot.
Wow, that's
All right. I was
quite
wondering-
the. I was waiting for the emphatic. Oh,
But Yota is going to, I'll finish that up.
this
show
has been quite eventful. All right,
I think he's
Matt.
back.
Matt, okay, you were like this, and you said he's not going to win the Golden Boot, and then you froze.
Oh,
So,
no.
Pick
Okay.
up from there.
No. The Lego head will win the Golden Boot. That's my pick. But if there's a dark horse, it might actually be a fully healthy Diego Jota. Gapco can do a Bobby Firmino impersonation. Diaz, he was missed last year. Scoring goals is not going to be a problem. And I think we're going to need it because if you look at the midfield, it's different. It's way more creative with McAllister and Sabazalai. But it's a lot of really young, inexperienced guys providing the sort of defensive muscle. And look, we've seen, especially if Klopp likes to play this high line, if you don't have those, at least one destroyer in that midfield, the defense gets exposed. I see a lot of 4-3, 5-3 kind of matches this season. Like I said, shades of 2013, 14, 17, 18.
Chelsea Mike, we've gotten Matt's opinion on Chelsea. Let's get your opinion on your first opponent in Liverpool. What do you think of them, and where do you see that? How do you see them going in this game on Sunday, and then for the rest of the season?
I mean, I think they're 2 transfer windows behind us. I think they're in a rebuild, and they kind of don't really know it. They didn't know it last year. Their results were underwhelming. I think that the depths at which Chelsea found themselves last year are a possibility for Liverpool this year. I'm not necessarily certain that they've found their way forward. I mean, I think that the losses they've taken up front. I mean, Matt seems to think they'll be fine offensively. I don't necessarily know that that's the case. And I don't really think you've seen it. Matt seems adamant that this won't be a 0-0 draw on Sunday. I'm equally as certain it might be. It's, first of all, Chelsea and Liverpool have had fine attacks over the years and still come to 0-0. I just don't think that they've made the kind of moves over the summer that really signify that they're really rebuilding. Yeah, they're younger, and in some places they're younger because that's all that's left. But I think that they need to fully commit to a world where Mo Salah is not there. They need to commit to a world where this generation is gone, and they just haven't yet.
Well,
So
go ahead.
well, so I mean, just kind of in short, that like the coping, the pain, the struggles that we had to go through last year, I could see Liverpool having to go through this year and really getting to next summer and figuring out that they have to just, they just have to do absolutely a major overhaul on their side.
There's two. First of all, I agree with you in terms of we're probably 2 windows, or at least a window and a half behind you. But particularly at like one particular place on the pitch, like we've been doing the kind of piecemeal rebuilding, but we just ignored the middle of the pitch for 3 years, and that's we're seeing the issues with that. The kind of dramatic overhaul that you're calling on, and this is where both of our clubs are different, be it the Abramovich Chelsea, the Todd B Chelsea. Our owners are freaking FSG. I mean, if we went full on throttle, they'd all be 19-year-olds. I would like to have seen a little bit more of that. Like, for example, I wish we were in the Caicedo, argument. But let's be real. We don't bid on guys over 80 mil. And that's not because we don't have the money. It's just our ownership is cheap. And they found a manager who is willing to work with these constraints.
Matt, it's funny that you bring up the manager, though, because if Klopp is able to rebuild this reload, whatever you want to call it, this Liverpool team, it'll be the first time that he's done it. Because typically our experience has been that, we get to a rebuild. He's great at building a squad, but then pieces leave, they need to be replaced. Whatever it is, that is where it sort of kind of doesn't work for him, because he gets into a situation where when he's building the squad, he's able to put everybody together. He's able to coach them all up at the same time. He's able to build that camaraderie, that knowledge amongst all the pieces. But then when he gets to rebuild, it becomes a struggle for him to insert those pieces again and train a guy up well enough to do that. I do agree that he's built the attack up at the expense of the midfield. I would also argue at the expense of the defense, because I think that's the next thing to go. It is very, 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 very reliant on Virgil van Dijk.
I'm worried about the lack of a natural 6. I am actually equally as worried at we really need another center back. And, Klopp has said, as recently as today, he wants another one. But this is this is a combination of, this is FSG, this is also Jurgen Klopp. Klopp identified Mike's boy Levi Colwell as, this is the center back I want. Okay, that's unrealistic. There doesn't really seem to be a plan B, which worries me. And with the way that our owners move, it's like, okay, you want a center back? Well, Mike, my fear is on, deadline day, we get the left-sided center back version of Arthur Mella. That rando dude that we bought from Preston North End with the same name as the brother from Tottenham that we just kept for a year, that never made the bench, and then sold to Celtic for a profit. Or like they'll reboot Ozan Kabak on like a loan deal, like something silly where it's like, oh, we got you your center back, but this is who it is. It's the frustration for me about this rebuild is that we could have future-proofed, or at least attempted to future-proof this piecemeal over the last 3 summer windows, and we chose not to. And with the way that our ownership model is and our structure is, as painful as last year was for Chelsea, Mike, we can at least look at this season and now and say, okay, it's almost like a clean slate. We run the risk, and Mike will understand this. of devolving into like late 70s, early 80s, the Soviet Union, where it's just this stagnant thing. Like we never bottom out, but we're not never reached those like heights of the earlier tenure. And I guess that's sort of my I guess a long-term fear.
Well, I think before you reach that fear, you're going to see the backside of Jurgen Klopp, which will mean another vision will come in.
Yeah.
But
And I think it's funny, Mike's talking about a future without Mo. It's a shame Cam couldn't join us. I'm not saying this is the truth, but there may be a young Scotsman who potentially could be the future on that right side. My biggest fear is, what does the future of Liverpool without Jurgen Klopp look like?
I think that's the future. I think that you're going to see that. And then let's move on and talk about them because we could. The reigning champions. Pep has now accomplished everything that he possibly could, not only in the English game, but in the game in general. He won a treble with Barcelona, and he now won a treble with Manchester City. We learned last year that the quadruple is probably a little bit unreasonable as an actual competition. We've seen plenty of teams go for it and just fail because it's just too much throughout. Sooner rather than later, City are going to get used to a life without Klopp. But unlike a lot of teams, they have this built-in system with a lot of really top-notch young players. But you got to get the right guy to, the right person to come in and manage them. I guess the big question, and I'll start with you, Stead. Do we see anybody challenging, making a sustained challenge to Manchester City to stop them from winning their fourth consecutive Premier League title? The closest was Arsenal last year. Can they get over the hurdle, or is the relentless pressure of having to lead City just too great for anybody?
Yeah, the only way Arsenal could is if they do something to shore up their attack, and that's still a question mark. Kai Havertz is a piece that I'm 50-50 on, but still, fine. I mean, Gabriel Jesus is proven to be just too injury prone. He just can't seem to stay healthy, and even though he's effective when he's on the field, he's just not on the field. And sorry, it's going to be almost insurmountable as long as they still have Kevin De Bruyne feeding the ball to Lego head. I don't know. It just seems too difficult for me. I don't see a way that that Arsenal or Man U can overcome this squad without there being some sort of injury crisis that City goes through. I mean, if they have a meltdown like after they won the title, where all of their center backs just happened to be out and they had to put James Milner and Jordan Henderson back there, outside of that occurring, I just don't see how the other teams just aren't stacked enough. Because you got to understand this, though, every other team that can compete with them is also playing Champions League, and they're also playing League Cup, they're also playing FA Cup, and they're probably looking to win various things too. And say which one about Arsenal. If Arsenal don't win something this year, it's gonna be kind of bad. They gotta win something. They gotta win. They gotta win a trophy, and it can't be the Community Shield. So it's. I think because you're going to see other teams that are going to try to compete for the title, but you can see this by March. This just kind of becoming a thing where other teams are going to be looking elsewhere. It's going to be hard. I just feel like this team is just too deep, and they didn't really. I mean, yeah, they lost
Gundogan,
but
they didn't. That's not the be all and end all.
It's not. I'm like, but they bought in. Who they bring in? They
brought in Vardiol.
Yeah.
Which means that they will now. The one thing Pep has managed to do is
they bought in Kovacic. Yeah.
They bought in Kovacic and Vardiol. I will give Pep credit. He has now won his war on fullbacks. because they'll be able to start 4 center backs back there. So he has finally eliminated the fullback position entirely from Manchester City.
Yeah, and look, I think Arsenal have a very good shot to finish second again. I just don't see how they can get over the hump. I just don't.
That I'm going to give you a chance to go to get in on Arsenal second, but I do want to get Mike's or Chelsea Mike's opinion on whether or not there's a legit challenger to City this year.
I kind of feel like if it's going to come from anywhere, it's got to come from Arsenal.
Mhm.
And I know our beleaguered Arsenal fan in attendance here tonight might not believe it, but I do think they've got the best shot. They're another year older. They're more mature. They kind of went through a rebuild, much like Chelsea, bringing in youth. And I think in a lot of ways, it's not the Brighton model. It's the Arsenal model that Chelsea are trying to follow.
Stick with your coach. Don't fire your coach. Yeah.
Well,
Just stick with it, because like we're asking the question, when is Arteta going to be on the hot seat? I mean, you were asking that question a couple of years ago, and I was just like, look, I don't see anybody else is going to take this job. You have to stick with him, and it's paid off. I think Chelsea have to do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean that would be nice. I think they genuinely want to, and then in that way, last year, Roman Abramovich would have moved on, I think, a little bit quicker, but City are really good, man.
They're so good. They're so
City
good.
are really good.
Yeah,
and Holland,
they're
they
just so good.
And they make smooth little moves, and they sell
do.
off 1 or 2 guys, and they bring in 1 or 2 guys. I don't know.
Mhm.
Kovacic, to me, Kovacic is at the tail end of his career.
Yeah, but he can fill a role. He can come in off the bench, and he can just come for 30 minutes, not wear out his knees, be effective. Because he's not going to be relied on.
Right. I do think that the Gundogan thing is kind of big in some of the lesser competitions, because Gundogan was kind of a star in the mid rounds.
I'll give you that. He was. He especially the last couple of years, he was really, really, really a big cog in that machine.
Right, but when you're winning Europe, I mean, who cares about who cares about the League Cup anymore? Who cares about really even the FA Cup? Would I trade an FA Cup for Europe? Like,
hey, look, we got 14 of them.
13.
I'd give up 5 of them for one Champions League. Absolutely.
Exactly. But I mean, obviously the odds-on favorite, if you want to just rock your chalk and bet Man City.
Yeah,
I don't think you're going to lose.
No, I don't either. I mean, it worries me that Man City is becoming the Bayern Munich of the Premier League. But I go ahead, Matt, because you're itching to speak. So jump in.
They do 4 in a row. I think we do have to have that larger conversation.
Yeah, I think we do. Well, we should put that on the back burner. And
your boys, Stead, you're the hope, I guess.
Yeah.
You're definitively, in my eyes, the second best team
and
the most well positioned. Man, would I love Declan Rice at Liverpool right now, but I think it makes more sense that he's at Arsenal, Arsenal and him, because Klopp would run him into the ground in 2.5. And I like the defensive stability it brings to your structure. I like Timber. I think that's a really underrated sign. I have no goddamn idea what Kai Havertz does. So that's
I've got to say, you know what, Stead, I'm really happy that you have Kai Havertz, because we have your money.
Yeah, I'm just sitting there going, we don't need somebody else who's going to shoot the ball into the side of the net. We don't need that again. I don't. For 60 million too. I just like
And
Huh?
it's scratching to me, and I understand the striker market is not great right now. And knowing Arsenal, knowing their fan base, bringing in a large Serbian man that has really effed up views about the history of that region wouldn't be a good idea. But I figured they would bring in a more prototypical number 9 to
Yeah.
Jesus.
Mhm.
There is a path, though, for Arsenal. You mentioned injuries. I
Mhm.
don't think it's necessarily like the catastrophic every center back Liverpool has gets hurt. In the course of
I mean,
two
that's really
weekends,
happened.
two goddamn weekends scenario. I think the loss of Gundogan does hurt. I think Riyad Mahrez is, unless you believe in Cole Palmer, which we can revisit that in January. He's Cole Palmer.
Mhm.
In some ways they are weakened, but you have, and I've always liked Kovacic. You have Kovacic in a team where he can be rotated,
Mhm.
get the best out of him. I love cardio. That there's a real chance that in 2 years he's the best central defender in the EPL. I think
Mhm.
he's that good.
Mhm. Yeah, it's going to be between him and Saliba. Absolutely.
If Lego Man and or Rodri get hurt and miss significant time, then that kind of balances things out.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like everybody at a position has to get hurt. I think it's one or two big injuries in certain places.
Yeah.
Disrespect to Alvarez, I think he's very good, but he's
Mhm.
not a machine,
Mhm.
not a Norwegian machine.
Right.
I look at Arsenal and it's funny, like I'm high on my team's attack. I look at you and it's almost the opposite. Like I'm envious of the control you can have
Mhm.
in games.
Yeah.
But man, if Martinelli and Saka aren't scoring goals,
Right.
I think that's your undoing.
Yeah, well, and that's what's concerning too, is that Bukayo Saka is expected to put out assists too. He can't. Look, the 2020 Henry year that happens once every 15 years. That just does not happen. So how they're going to produce the goals in order to be able to compete is one thing, but also it still is a problem for Arsenal. It's still a problem. Arsenal still folds in big games. They still do it. They did it against City. They shit the bed. They look terrible. They still do it. They did it against Manchester United this past year too. Like they have issues when it comes to the big game. They tend to play tentatively. They play scared and they get beat up. And this has been a problem for this team since Patrick Vieira left. I mean, this has been a problem. So the hope is Declan Rice can somehow rally the troops in a way to get them going. Because I'm sorry, I don't think Martin Odegaard should be the captain. I just don't. I do not think he should be.
I think that's part of why I like Rice in the setup.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess back to Chelsea Mike's point, because I witnessed this with Liverpool when we were chasing and then finally got over the hump. The only way you build that kind of maturity is it's growing pains.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I don't know if last year was enough, but like 2019, 2020 doesn't happen if 2018 and 2019 doesn't happen.
Yeah, but the way they got dumped out of Europa League too, Arsenal got dumped out of Europa League last year too. And look, also let me say this too. You're listening to a guy who's putting the blame on players who haven't been there that long. And that's not fair. I really shouldn't do that. But as the fans who had to experience these types of L's that have occurred over the years with completely different squads, you're still seeing the shirt, and it's almost like the shirt is somehow infected to cause this type of reaction whenever they're game. So the hope is that, yes, I really hope that you are 100% right, that the growing pains they experienced last year, where they actually Arsenal has spent more time in top position and not won the league than every other team combined. And so the hope is that hopefully that stung enough that when they do play City again, or when they have to play Newcastle or they have to play Manchester United, they may be up on points, but they have to go into Old Trafford and win, that they're able to do so. That's that.
Wait, before we just completely move on to Arsenal, and I want to say one more thing about City, and this is relevant to Arsenal because this is gonna give Arsenal fans the hope. And I am going to put it out here right now so that in December, when we're talking about does Pep have it anymore? Is Pep's fully committed anymore? Pep won Europe. Does he even care anymore? And when they're sitting in third, like 4 points back in December, like just remember they finished strong. And Arsenal does not finish strong. Like,
Well, that was the point that I made originally, was to beat City to the title. You have to sustain that charge because they will come on, and they are that horse that chases, right? And you know that it's coming, and you just have to be able. Can you weather the storm? Instead, I don't know if you touched on it while I stepped away, but I think you've got to deal with this thing with. Last year, Arsenal played without the weight of expectation. At the beginning of the season, you and I and Sean and G were all talking about the fact that, coming off of the dreadful season that was the year before, if they could be thereabouts in the European race, that would have been a good season. And like you said, they spent more time in first place than any team that has not won the championship. By any measure, that would normally be a good season, but it stung because, they had it and they came away with nothing.
Yeah, but the hope is that it stung the players, though, because look, you ask any Arsenal fan, I don't think any Arsenal fan was confident that we were going to win the league. It was more of just, let's just enjoy this while this is going on, because this is a remarkable turnaround from what we were expecting from the previous year. The fact that we're even here, enjoyable. And then when the bottom came out, there was disappointment, of course, but it was very short-lived. Then we went back to toasting ourselves because the fact that we're going to finish second in the league this year when we were just begging for a top four finish. So the hope is that this thing is on the players. I hope they feel it. They feel this thing.
Well,
they don't want to be in that position again.
So you got two things. You've got Professor Matt talking about, Liverpool losing out in 18-19 and coming back and winning it in 19-20. But then 2021, it was United, and United finished second. And then we saw what happened in 21-22. The bottom falls out. Ole is gone. And the Rock just comes to the forefront. Now, I do think that one of the advantages that Arsenal has is I don't think they have as much dead weight in their squad as that United squad had. But, going back to that well and doing that, it really either it comes up one of two ways. Either you are successful, you do push forward, you do come out, and I do agree with you. I do think they need to come out of this season with something. I don't know what that something is. Is that something the EFL Cup? Is that something the FA Cup? Is that something a Europa League championship? Is that something crazy like they actually do win the Premier League, or they are able to put together that mythical run and get to a Champions League final or win a Champions League final? But they do have to come out with something that they can hang their hat on and be able to say, like, we moved forward. Because if it is another season where you lose in Europe, you lose in all the cups, and you come in second by whatever margin, it's like, okay, well, where did we move forward this year? What can we say that we did better this season? Because then it's, all right, this is what we know we need to address, right? Goal scoring is going to be a bit of an issue. How much can Bukayo Saka continue to do? And probably he should be your captain because he is the franchise right now.
Yeah. But hold on a second. Chelsea Mike, finish your point about why I should feel good. Just finish it because I want to make sure I get all that in, and then we'll go back to what I you didn't get out.
Well, I think the point was done. I wasn't saying you were going to do it, but you're our best hope. Help us, Obi-Wan.
Okay, so that was a horrible transition, Mike. Please jump back in.
No, yeah, no, but I mean, I mean, look, in Martinelli and in Saka, you've got two great attackers. I mean, obviously they're not Erling Haaland, who, by the way, you guys, for the last hour I've been on the show, has not been named once. He's been called Lego Headman. And if you're new to soccer and you don't know who Lego Headman is, it's Erling Haaland, and he's the best player in the world. But you don't have that. But you've got some really good stuff there, and I say, you're like, well, I don't know if we should rely on Saka. Yeah, rely on Saka. He's really good.
He's making 300,000 a week now, so
I mean, that's less than Mason Mount. So I mean, and I think he's going to have a better year. So just I think you guys. I mean, you've got Declan Rice now too. I mean, you've got a deep lying guy who can break into that attack in a way that you didn't have last year. So
we haven't had in a long time.
Right. And so, there's the potential is there. The capitalization on it, it's Arsenal though, man. You got to be better than Arsenal.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna wrap it up and give them and talk about the other one of the four teams that we all root for that we haven't spoken about tonight, and that's my Manchester United. We finished third last year. Won a EFL Cup, the first trophy that they've won, I don't know, since Ferguson left. I know that's not the case. And made it to a pretty decent final in the FA Cup. There have been some additions this year. David De Gea, CC exit, Andre Onana comes in.
And you finally got rid of Phil Jones.
We finally got rid of Phil Jones.
You've been trying to get Phil Jones to Arsenal for 5 years.
Phil Jones hasn't been there in a while, as little as he's actually been able to play.
That saddens me, and not as a Liverpool fan, but he was that dude who you forgot existed until like your boys had a bad injury crisis. And I was like, oh man, Phil Jones.
Yeah, I mean, and the injury problems are so severe for him. I just don't think that you will see him play again.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's unfortunate that his career has turned out the way that it has, because listen, I mean, dude had quality. He was
good
a solid player.
he was good at so he was good.
Play, and had he got an opportunity to develop properly through coaching and his own health, really, really, really could have been a great player for both Manchester United and England. It just, unfortunately, it just didn't work that way for him.
Diaby and him. I felt bad for him.
Phil Jones. We still, as of right now, have Eric Bailly on the roster. Another guy that you forgot existed. So, listen, it is that thing. It's like, you know, you look at the starting 11, maybe the top 15, and you're like, okay, well, there's something there. But then after that, there's just a whole lot of bloat, and Eric Ten Hag needs to clear that out. And the problem is that we know from the experience of last year how he's going to handle this team. He is going to run that starting 11 pretty much out every game that he can, and he's going to play them, and it's going to be 50, 60 games for those guys, and that's a lot to play for all of them. What type of shape are they in? What's going to happen if there's an injury? You know, there really still isn't anything behind Rasmus Haaland as a striker. You know, they're still going to be very reliant on the goals that Marcus Rashford can score. I do think, as much as Chelsea Mike wants to complain, that Mason Mount gives them a little bit of something different to Bruno Fernandes in the midfield, and that'll be an upgrade. We'll see if what Onana turns out to be. David De Gea was a great shot stopper, but we all know that he had a fair few issues, none more so than the goals that he let in the FA Cup final. It is going to be very interesting to see what this team can do. So I almost want to say it's like the kit range for the season. There's some good there, but there's also some good that's papering over some bad, and some design choices that are questionable, but if they get pulled off, they'll look good. There's just a variety of things there. I expect Newcastle to be better.
Mm-hmm.
I expect Tottenham to be a better team this year. I expect Chelsea to be a better team this year. I expect Liverpool to be a better team this year, which means that, when you're dealing with a league like the Premier League, where there is a defined top 7, you can have a really good season and not finish in a European place.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you do when that happens? If United are thereabouts, they have a good season, and it's 1 or 2 injuries that happen, and you do finish 7th, and that keeps you out of Europe. Do you get rid of Eric Ten Hag? I hope not, because he seems to be the most competent manager that they've had since Sir Alex Ferguson left.
Mm-hmm.
And he needs time and the backing. It also, this sale issue that continues to hang over them is going to be a problem, right? We've managed to negotiate the offseason, but it's going to become more and more of an issue as it goes on.
And as you brought up previously, there is the stadium's also getting a little old. It's getting kind of beat up, right?
The stadium is very, very beat up to the point where it will not. I could not imagine a situation where England is hosting the Euros and Manchester and Old Trafford will not host a game because it's so out of shape.
Wow. My biggest question also about Manchester United, really, because I do agree with you. I feel like they have a definite 12 or 13 players that are of very high quality, but it seems as if I feel like Jadon Sancho's just kind of gotten lost, and he is a really, really, like, when he's on, phenomenal. He's just phenomenal. And I think what's good is that he's only 23. He's still very, very young. But I feel like this is a pivotal year for him. I think this is where he can really, really step up and become a real cog in that machine to hopefully deal with what you're talking about, with the fact that I expect Newcastle to continue to be good. They made some good offseason moves. I expect Chelsea to be better. Spurs, I don't know. I just don't know. I mean, I just can't right now with Spurs. I don't think they know what they're doing just yet.
I mean, I think they'll be better. I just don't know what they'll be.
Yeah, I think they'll be the same as last year, because if you look at what their record was and how many points they finished, they had over 60 points. I see them being at the same place this year. I do. But I do agree with you, though, Mike. I see that the teams are better. Chelsea is going to be better. Liverpool is going to be better. Liverpool just kept shooting themselves in the foot last year. I don't know how many chances Liverpool had to break into the top 4, and they just decided not to. So it's going to be a trying season. And I think if Manchester United maybe makes a few more moves to shore up the bench a little bit more, or just decide that they're not going to put too much attention into the cup games, and that they could still compete, because I just feel like the top line is still good. It's still a good squad.
A lot of Manchester United is also going to be about who, if anybody, takes that big step forward in between last year and this year, right? If Garnacho takes a major step forward, all of a sudden they have another a top tier attacking option. That makes them a lot more dangerous. If Anthony is able to take that step forward, they're going to be a completely different team. As you said, it's Sancho. Now, Sancho is the most interesting one because we've seen what he's capable of doing, but if you've watched him play with United on occasion, what he has been asked to do for Manchester United versus what he used to do for Borussia Dortmund are completely different things. I think he might be best served by going to a Barcelona type system, because when you watch him play, what he likes to do is he gets the ball, he passes the ball immediately, and then moves into the next position. He's not a guy who is going to take on. He doesn't seem to be as comfortable taking on players and trying to break them down off the dribble and create a shot opportunity or an assist. What he's best at doing is putting himself into a position where he can just get a shot or an assist. What I liken this to, for those of you guys who watch NBA basketball, it's like the difference in between a Ray Allen and a Paul Pierce. Paul Pierce is a phenomenal player on the wing who can create his own shot. Ray Allen is a phenomenal player on the wing who functions best when you get the ball into his hands and he just is a stand and shoot guy, right? Hall of Famers, both, but just two different skill sets. What they've asked him to do, whether or not it fits into what he is best at or what he is capable of, is what we need to see. I think that being able to break a player down off the dribble, to be able to take guys one-on-one, is a facet of Jadon's game that he does need to develop, and that is what's going to stop him from being a top-tier world-class winger. The fact that he doesn't feel comfortable doing that, because if he can add that to his game, then there's really no one out there who can stop him. But what we've seen since he's come to Manchester United is a hesitancy to do that in game situations, and B, when he does, it becomes problematic for him, and then he gets into his head and he just doubts his own talent, and he just gets very confused out there. So is he able to take this step forward? If he is able to take that step forward and be able to do that within the, then yeah, look, if some of those players are able to step up, then I'm not saying that United can challenge City, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're in the conversation for second in the league. But based on what I saw last year, which is the only evidence that I have to go on, is expecting people to play within the realms of what they have done and what they have been doing. Most recently, it is a situation where I think that that's a team that's going to fight for a Champions League spot. They're going to be in the conversation for third, fourth, but unfortunately, if you're in the conversation for third and fourth, you're also in the conversation for fifth and sixth, right? And that does not always work to our advantage.
Michael, I gotta say, I don't know if you're just the years of not winning the title have beat you down. If they've just run your face into this negativity. Manchester United, while I don't think they're really going to do that much better than last season, they have the most potential upside of any team. I'm talking like a big shooting spike could take them over Man City. They've got the new signings. You all are high on Mason Mount. Good for you. I hope that works out for you. I'm just going to grin here when it doesn't, but thank you for the money. Jadon Sancho, it was his first year in the Premier League last year.
It wasn't. That's the thing. He's been there 2 years.
It's been there 2 years.
Well, okay, so he's young. He's young. You still have Bruno Fernandes. You don't. Harry Kane is not your captain anymore. I mean, you brought in a new striker. You still have Rashford. You've got the talent. You've got goal scorers. You've got proven goal scorers. You've got Casemiro in the six, and Varane and Martinez are really good defenders. And I will say, I will say the only signing of the summer that I'm jealous that Chelsea didn't make is Onana. I'm a goalie for one thing, but I think he's a really good one and could really benefit a team for a while, especially with my team. You know, I think we're going to start Kepa on Sunday, and that makes me sad. So,
But
your team has the kind of players that, if put together right, and I think you have confidence in Ten Hag, they could compete and could win the title, especially, again, like we talked about before, if City gets injuries and stuff, then it's up for grabs. I mean, the upside to your team is bigger than any other team. I think what's dragging you down from being so optimistic is the reality that, you know, it is going to take an uptick. I mean, does Mason Mount provide that? You know, is your scoring better this year from up top? But you've got don't get down already. Jeez, they haven't played a game
don't
yet,
get me
man.
wrong. I'm not getting down already. I'm not thinking like, oh, the woe is us. But like you said, I do have to, especially on this show, operate in a sphere of reality. And the reality of the situation is it's going to take players playing at taking a massive step forward for us to be at that level of which you speak, to realize that potential upside. And that's very, very, very hard to predict, right? Because you're counting on the unknown, right? You know, Hodgland has the skill set to be a 20 goal a year striker in the Premier League. He does. And that's the potential aspect of it. And that's why we paid as much as we did, was for that potential. But the reality of the situation is he's not scored double-digit goals in his career, right? You know, you're counting on Anthony, who has all the skill in the world to put it all together and form himself into a full right-sided inverted winger. But we've also seen his propensity to do tricks and things like that. And all I can say is, you know, back when I was in the military, a guy once told me, you know, when it gets into these situations, guys revert to their lowest level of training. And so what I've got to go operate on is that everybody is going to play to the type that they are, right? I do expect that Alejandro Garnacho is going to take a step forward. Now, I don't know how great that step forward is going to be, but I predict that he is going to be an important player for us. You know, I would love to see, you know, Jadon Sancho recapture some of the form that he had at Borussia Dortmund. But what I have seen with my eyes is that when he gets into the game, what he wants to do and what he needs to do what he's being asked to do and what he feels best at doing are, like I just explained, often two different things. Now, with a full other offseason in the Eric Ten Hag system, has Ten Hag been able to figure out how to merge those two things? I don't know. I'm not at Carrington every day, so I don't know how he can, whether or not he's done that. You know, the one thing is that this is the first time that we've had basically a full core for the spring, for an extended period leading into the season. Like a lot of these guys, Casemiro, Anthony, even to a certain extent, Lisandro Martinez, were relatively late additions last year, so he's had an entire offseason work with them. I've also got to acknowledge, like, this team is not the deepest, right? So you want to go back to the times where we won the title, and I could look and say it was because, you know, if Nemanja Vidic goes down, I can count on a guy like Johnny O'Shea to come in and fulfill that role for a couple of games. You know, if Ronaldo goes out, I know that Nani can hold it down for a couple of games. My problem is if Lisandro Martinez goes out, I've got Lindelof coming in. But I am 2 injuries away from dealing with an injury-prone center back and one who's massively undersized. I'm 2 injuries away from having to rely on Harry Maguire as a starting midfielder for Manchester United, and that is never the greatest situation to be.
Mike, I've got to say, I'm proud of you for a couple things. One, I'm proud of you that you can still remember when Man U used to win titles. I mean, it's been a good amount of time.
Hey, I'll shut you up by saying I can remember when John Terry messed up that kick, and I can remember where you were too when he did, and I can remember the fact that we won that Champions League. So there's that too.
Now we made up for it. Where's Byron Robb? By the way, speaking of Byron Robb, Michael, while we have been sitting here and talking, our beloved Philadelphia Union have overcome the Red Bulls in penalties. So, haha, Byron Robb, where you at? Where you at?
I was watching Internacional and River Plate in the Copa Libertadores, which ended up 9-8 on penalties for Internacional.
But getting back to Man U, you are kind of right in that the depth isn't what you really want it to be. And so I think that as such, the focus has to be, if there's, you don't really get into cups until December. And so if there's a sniff, a whiff at the Premier League, they've got to put the cups aside and just go for it. And
I think that he came out last year and did well in the FA Cup and won the EFL Cup, right? If it looks this year like we are putting a premium on maintaining a Champions League place and getting through to the knockout stages of the Champions League, I'm not going to be upset if that is where we are this season, right? If we make a decent run and we go through to the knockout stages of the Champions League, you want to talk going back far enough to remember when we were able to make it through with any consistency to the knockout stages of the Champions League is having to remember some stuff for Manchester United, because it's been a struggle to do just that.
But you know what I'm saying? Don't be like Tottenham. You know what, Michael? The sun will rise in the east, it will set in the west, and Tottenham will not win a trophy. There's,
I don't even know where
there's
to
death,
go.
taxes, and Tottenham will not win a trophy. There's 3 certainties in life. Don't
taxes and Tottenham not winning a trophy.
Yeah, death, taxes, and Tottenham not winning a trophy. There's 3 certainties in life. Don't make top 4 your goal, man. You've got your team is better than you think.
Let's
Matt, jump in. Let Matt jump in. Matt.
I know our time is limited. There's no Tottenham fan in the conversation, but this has to be said because I keep hearing, oh, the top 6 is now a top 7. Why do we assume Tottenham is part of this?
That's a very good point. That's a really good point.
I give you evidence because Daniel Levy is not a normal human being. Like, you have a chance to reboot, and Germans are giving you money. You don't take their money. And here's the funny thing. We're talking about, can United score enough goals? Which is legit. That's my concern about. Next year, when that guy with the list shows up, yeah, they can score plenty of goals. He's coming there on a free. What? That's all I have.
Well, I mean, there are a couple of situations that we didn't get to today as far as on preview stuff. Then that was one of them. Like, what is Tottenham doing with this situation? The only thing that I can imagine is that Daniel Levy is reluctant to give up on Harry Kane for 100 million euros, which would actually still be the highest incoming transfer in Tottenham history, because it's not a world record, right? When Gareth Bale left, it was a world record for an English player. It was a world record for an outgoing. It's this weird thing in between the conversion rate as to who was more expensive at the time, Ronaldo or Gareth Bale. But let's make no mistake about it, that was an 89 million pound transfer. You just got offered $11 million more than that. And I know that economics and inflation is, especially in soccer, is a real thing. But you have to think about that. And Matt, when you were talking about Levy not being a normal human being, what you failed to mention in that is, anybody catch where their owner was indicted for fraud?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's why I'm like, Spurs ain't gonna do better.
Or as much as I have issues with FSG, I look at them and I'm like, okay, Eastern European optimism, it can always be worse.
Yeah, like that would be an issue that you need to deal with, especially, right now, as you are holding on to your one or two biggest assets. But then, Matt, at the beginning of the show, we talked about the fact, like, strangely, even without getting rid of Harry Kane, they somehow managed to spend about 178 million pounds in the transfer window, and most of it, like a sizable portion, was on two guys that they had on loan and converted their options.
Yeah, and peripheral dudes who were on Liverpool's radar, but were never really linked with. And look, I get it. If ever a team is in need of a radical rebuild, it's Tottenham. But you have, you just said, two sellable assets. You can make this a lot easier if you give up the ghost and just move on. And the Kane thing, Mark Harris, if you're out there, God bless you. Tottenham fans who care. This has to be the most frustrating thing, because Kane has effectively said, there's no future with you. So then, like, when Bayern came in with that offer, I was like, this is a Daniel Levy wet dream. He can make money, which they may spend wrong. They probably will, but you get money. And he moves to not a direct rival.
And I'm sorry, you're getting 100 million euros for a player who is 30 years old.
Yeah.
And in the last
30.
But not only
last
is
year
he,
of his contract,
Yeah.
and out of like
what do you
a
do?
no-brainer.
I'm sorry. I'm like,
I kind of think the problem there is Harry Kane. I don't think Harry Kane wants to do it.
his wife
doesn't
is
want to
already in Munich buying property.
Yeah, like
His
they
wife
already
is already there.
Bayern said that they would buy him a property.
Yeah, his wife has already scouted the British school in Munich. They're there already.
Mike, that was my big fear, because I thought he was going to be like, I'm Harold, I'm from London, but no, he's like,
I don't care about a Premier League goal record. Who cares?
Yeah, and
I
like,
want to win something.
yeah,
I mean,
It's
10 million euros in your pocket isn't bad either.
I'm sorry, man. It's just this is.
But
This is
you want to talk about things that are going to backfire? Like, okay, where does this have the potential to go? Like, they're going to deny this. He's not. So you're going to hold on to him. You're going to give him the ability to sit and determine his own fate next year. He's already expressed that he doesn't necessarily want to leave England, which means that you're not going to see him out of England until, if he goes to Bayern, he signs a 5-year deal. He's 30 now. He doesn't come up for free agency again until he's 35. He's way past his sell-by date by then. You have nothing to worry about ever seeing him again.
Oh.
You know, you let him go, he will go to Manchester United. He will go to Chelsea. He will go right across town. He could go right across town.
He could go to Arsenal.
He could go he could go to West Ham.
He could go to West Ham.
Or Newcastle. Wouldn't that make so much sense? Simpatico.
I don't think that I think he goes to United before he goes to Newcastle because you know, my sense of him and his lifestyle and English geography says Manchester United is Manchester's the furthest north he's going.
Right. He doesn't want to live in Scotland.
Yeah. And so like, but so you go from you're rid of him for the remainder of his career to I'm gonna see him guaranteed twice a year, but I'm also going to see him playing for. It's the Robin van Persie at Arsenal thing from Arsenal to Man United all over again, and that's where you don't want to be. And why? Because somebody didn't offer you a
Arsenal made
world record
25
transfer
million
fee.
off of it. I mean, geez. It's asinine. It's completely ridiculous. It's completely
But
ridiculous.
you could take the 100 million, pump in another 25, and get a younger Victor Osimhen, and call it a day.
Absolutely. And by doing this, first of all, it's not like you're going to get all of a sudden the Kane that leaves is somehow not quite the Kane that's still there. He's only going to be 31. He'll be 31. We've seen plenty of players play very effectively in their early 30s, especially in the way that he plays. He doesn't rely on athleticism. So who cares if he can't run? He never could run fast anyway. So the risk you're running, and for the reasons that you claim to be doing, absolutely no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. And every right, because they know in their hearts that he's wrong. It's Spursy. It's stupid. It's just
you're snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
Exactly.
One last thing that I want to touch on that I promised I would. And this
I
is
got
our
to go to bed
homage
too. We got to wrap this up.
Andy the Hammer. What in the world is going on at West Ham?
Okay, we can't do this now. Please, can we please pick this up? Because I can't. Because I got a lot to say about this. I got a lot to say about this, and I want to say something about this. And I want to get. I'm going to text Andy. I'm going to get his input. on this because he can't come on the show. He's beat writing for the Orioles, but he's beat writing for the Orioles. I can't get him, but I can at least get a text message from him to give me something to say. Give me something.
Can we throw Wolves into the mix too? Like what is going on there?
No, but what the West Ham thing is, it's bonkers right now. You're sitting on 105 million euros, and you're just like,
they're sitting on 105 million euros, and they want to give 30 of it to Manchester United for Harry Kane, or for Harry
Maguire. Yeah.
Fire.
All right, gentlemen. Hey, this is like that warm up set that you do after you have, that warm up run that you do after a while when you get back to running and you haven't done it in a while.
Knees hurt a little bit,
Knees hurt a little bit, the pacing's a little bit off, but then you still feel good, and you're like, I want to do that again.
Yeah.
I want to do this again.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, gentlemen, it's been fun. Let's do it again.
All right.
So we had a lot of fun this week. Thanks to Professor Mike, or Professor. You see, this is how I know I haven't done this one. We had a lot of fun this time. Big thanks to Professor Matt and Chelsea Mike for joining us, going through just a host of things. We talked about the Women's World Cup, the U.S. Women's National Team, Kylian Mbappe. We got into a little bit of the Premier League, just all around the circuit. So really great time. So thank you to you guys, and especially big shout out to producer Stead for keeping the trains running on time. So for Professor Matt, Chelsea Mike, producer Stead, and the entire cast of the Too Many Guys Soccer Show, I am Mike. We did all right this week. We'll try and do better next.